When most people imagine the dogs of the Vikings, they picture something enormous and terrifying. Massive war hounds with bared teeth, bred purely for violence, charging alongside raiders as they stormed foreign shores. This image fits neatly with the popular idea of Vikings themselves: brutal, unstoppable, and constantly at war. But like many things about Viking life, this expectation is shaped more by modern myth than historical reality. The truth is both more surprising and more interesting. While the Vikings certainly valued strong, capable dogs, most of the animals they lived with were not oversized monsters bred only for intimidation. They were working dogs. Practical, intelligent, adaptable, and often far fluffier and more approachable than modern audiences expect. These dogs herded livestock, guarded farms, hunted game, pulled loads, and lived closely alongside people in everyday life. Some may have looked intimidating when necessary, but many would have appeared closer to what we now think of as Spitz type or herding breeds rather than battlefield beasts. To understand Viking dogs, it's important to understand Viking society itself. Despite their reputation as raiders, the vast majority of Vikings were farmers. Their world revolved around small rural communities spread across Scandinavia, where survival depended on livestock, seasonal work, and cooperation. Dogs were essential tools in this environment. A good dog was not judged by how frightening it looked, but by how well it worked. Archaeological evidence supports this view. Dog remains have been found in Viking-age settlements, farms, and even graves. These remains show a wide range of sizes, but most fall into the small to medium category, rather than the massive dimensions people often imagine. Many had curled tails, thick coats, and upright ears, traits typical of northern working dogs adapted to cold climates. These were animals built for endurance, versatility, and intelligence, rather than sheer brute force. One of the most important roles dogs played in Viking life was herding. Sheep, goats, and cattle were central to the Scandinavian economy, and managing them across rugged terrain required skilled canine help. Dogs would drive animals between summer and winter pastures, protect them from predators, and keep them together during long movements. In this role, agility and responsiveness mattered far more than size. A nimble, alert dog that could read human signals and react quickly was infinitely more valuable than a slow, oversized animal. These herding dogs were likely similar in appearance and temperament to modern Nordic Spitz and farm dogs. They were sturdy but compact, thickly furred, and highly alert. Far from being fearsome beasts, they would have looked almost fox-like to modern eyes. Yet their intelligence and reliability made them indispensable. Dogs were also used for hunting, another vital aspect of Viking survival. Hunting supplemented diets with meat, furs, and hides, especially during harsh winters. Different types of dogs were likely used depending on the prey. Smaller, agile dogs helped flush birds or track animals through forests, while stronger dogs assisted in holding larger game, such as boar or deer, until the hunter arrived. Again, this required cooperation and training, not blind aggression. Guarding was another key function. And here the stereotype comes a little closer to reality, though still not in the way popular culture suggests. Viking farms were isolated, and theft or raids were real threats. Dogs acted as early warning systems, barking to alert households to strangers or animals approaching. They did not need to be enormous to do this effectively. A loud, alert dog with strong territorial instincts was often enough to deter intruders or give people time to respond. Some dogs were certainly bred to be more imposing, especially for guarding or prestige. Larger dogs may have been owned by wealthier individuals or chieftains, and historical sources suggest that powerful dogs were sometimes given as gifts between elites. These animals may have been closer to what we would recognize as mastiff-type dogs, though still smaller than many modern breeds. Even then, their value lay in protection and status rather than battlefield combat. One of the clearest indications of how Vikings viewed dogs comes from burial practices. Dogs were sometimes buried alongside humans, particularly in high-status graves. This was not done lightly. Burial goods reflected what the deceased valued and believed they would need in the afterlife. Including a dog suggests a deep bond and recognition of the animal's importance, whether as a working companion, protector, or symbol of loyalty. Old Norse literature also sheds light on how dogs were perceived. In sagas and poems, dogs are frequently described as loyal, perceptive, and emotionally connected to their owners. Some stories depict dogs mourning their masters or reacting instinctively to danger before humans notice it. These portrayals emphasize intelligence and companionship rather than savagery. Interestingly, Norse mythology also includes dogs, though not always in comforting roles. The most famous mythological dog is a monstrous guardian associated with the realm of the dead. While this figure contributes to the modern image of Viking dogs as fearsome creatures, it's important to remember that mythological animals were symbolic, not literal representations of everyday life. Just as dragons don't reflect Viking pets, monstrous dogs don't represent the dogs sleeping by Viking hearths. In daily life, dogs lived closely with people. They shared longhouses, followed families through seasonal routines, and worked alongside them year after year. In cold northern climates, dogs may even have helped provide warmth at night, curling up near sleeping humans. This proximity fostered familiarity and emotional attachment, making dogs more like family members than disposable tools. There is also evidence that dogs were involved in travel and trade. Vikings moved extensively across land and sea, and dogs would have accompanied them on journeys between farms, markets, and settlements. Some dogs may even have traveled on ships, helping guard cargo, or simply staying close to their owners. This adaptability speaks again to temperament rather than aggression. A dog that panicked easily or acted uncontrollably would have been useless on a long voyage. So, where does the image of giant Viking war dogs come from? Part of it comes from later medieval sources and foreign observers who exaggerated Viking ferocity. Part of it comes from modern storytelling, which prefers dramatic visuals over nuance. And part of it comes from projecting later European war dog traditions backward onto an earlier period where those practices were far less common. The reality is that Viking dogs were shaped by necessity, not spectacle. They had to survive harsh winters, work long hours, and cooperate closely with humans. This favored dogs that were resilient, intelligent, and emotionally stable. Many would have been fluffy rather than sleek, compact rather than towering, and expressive rather than intimidating. That doesn't mean Viking dogs were weak. On the contrary, they were tough, adaptable animals, capable of impressive feats of endurance and courage. But their strength was practical, not theatrical. They were designed for life, not legend. Understanding the dogs of the Vikings helps humanize the Vikings themselves. It reminds us that behind the raiders and warriors were families, farms, and daily routines. Dogs were part of that world, not as weapons of terror, but as partners in survival. They herded sheep, guarded homes, tracked game, and stayed close to the people who depended on them. In the end, the true Viking dog is not the monstrous warhound of popular imagination. It is a working companion with thick fur, sharp senses, and an unbreakable bond to its human. And in many ways, that makes it far more impressive than any myth.